Welcome back, everyone. In the United States, it is common for college students to take out loans, sometimes big loans, to fund their education. That debt is now worth almost $1.9 trillion in both federal and private student loans. A loan forgiveness program championed by U.S. President Biden could give millions of borrowers a one-time debt relief of up to $10,000 to even $20,000, depending on the type of federal loan they took out. However, two lawsuits have challenged the legality of the loan forgiveness plan, which was not approved by Congress. And now it's up to the U.S. Supreme Court to decide, and a decision is likely due by the end of June. It's a big issue here in the United States, and for a closer look at this ongoing fight for student loan forgiveness, let's turn to Ben Kaufman, Director of Research and Investigations at the Student Borrower Protection Center. Ben, welcome. A lot of questions about this right off the bat. I mean, I'm one of these kind of guys that had student loans. My kids have student loans. For an international audience, explain, give some kind of context to really how many Americans currently have student loan debt. And when I went through school, it was a lot cheaper than it is now. So kids going now can get saddled with tens, even hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt.
Yeah, no, Sean, it's a huge problem. Thank you for the question. Right now, more than 45 million people in the United States are paying on more than $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. So that comes out to more than $30,000 per person. And that means you can't save for retirement, you can't buy a house, you can't save for an emergency because you're paying on your student loans. Now, loans have been paused during COVID, but before COVID, about 1 in 4 borrowers was fully in default, and you had a new borrower entering default every 26 seconds in the United States. So this really represents a crisis for people in the U.S., and that's why cancellation is so necessary and important.
And also, let's talk just a bit about the entities that go after these loans and want the loans paid back. I mean, they're pretty militant about it.
It's true. So when people don't pay on their federal student loans in the United States, the government has really broad authorities to go after people. So they can garnish your wages, they can take your retirement benefits, and they can take other government benefits that people might be relying on just to pay the bills and to survive. And also, the way that the federal student loan system works, because most student loans in the U.S. are through the government, is that the management of the loans is contracted out to private companies called servicers who manage people's loans. But they do a pretty bad job of it, and they will regularly lie to people about their benefits under the law and the payment plans that they have available to them, and steer those borrowers toward plans that are less favorable to the borrowers but more favorable to the companies.
Translation, they're going to pay higher interest rates, and those companies are going to get that money quickly. Let's transition into the Supreme Court. What arguments are they considering, and your thoughts on this? Because I've had a number of people my age who obviously went through school at a different time, as I mentioned, when it was less expensive. And these guys bristle at the fact that people are talking about student loan forgiveness. But, I mean, you're talking making life so difficult for these young men and women who just get out of school saddled with these debts.
It's true, Sean, and again, it's so important. You know, the president very clearly has the authority under the law, under something called the HEROES Act, to take the action that he took, and that's to cancel up to $20,000 of student loan debt for low-income borrowers. That would amount to $400 billion of relief, most of it going to people earning less than $70,000 a year. And with about 20 million people having their debts fully wiped out. And a lot of those people are people who have small balances, but who have been stuck in default for a long time. Now, the big question that we think is going to be the sticking point is whether the states that sued the Biden administration have standing to sue, meaning can they show that they were actually harmed? And we don't think they can. And then even then, if the court determines that those people do have standing, we do think it's very clear under the law that the president has the authority in the context of COVID and the national emergency it represents to take the action that he took.
We also have a conservative court right now. You talked about the states. What is the state's argument, and to what degree can they argue that the U.S. economy could be adversely affected by all of this?
Well, the state's argument is straightforwardly that they would be harmed. They have this very thin argument that they, because they manage certain loans for the government, would lose out on revenue. But again, very clearly, if the Supreme Court were to rule against debt cancellation, all it would show is the corruption and ideological bend of the court and the kind of political capture that a lot of folks have been worried about when it comes to the United States Supreme Court. You know, just last week, it turned out that Justice Alito, one of the leaders in the conservative wing of the court, has been going on trips with a billionaire financier named Paul Singer, who in fact is behind a lot of the dark money organizations that have been pushing against debt cancellation, like groups like the Manhattan Institute. So if the court would rule against cancellation in the context of the very clear legal apparatus that allows the president to take the action he took, all it would show is, again, the political and ideological commitments of the folks on the right wing.
Okay, let's take for an instant that the court is going to rule against the Biden administration. Does the administration have a plan B? What do student advocates say? And I'm curious, is there a national poll that has weighed in on this? What percent supports forgiveness? What percent does not?
Well, and that's a really important point, Sean, that cancellation has always been and remains extremely popular. And, despite various economists and other academics complaining that it shouldn't be so popular, it has remained so even as it's gone through the courts. I certainly can't speak to what's going on inside the building at the White House. I don't know if there is a plan B, but we're definitely going to be pushing for one. Advocates have laid out very clearly for the administration and public that they have additional authorities that they could use to accomplish the same kinds of ends and, in fact, to instantiate the same exact plan that they've already tried to do under the authorities that they used when they did the initial cancellation action. So we're going to be really loudly demanding that the Biden administration have a plan B and that it follow through on the promise of cancellation.
Okay, Ben, I hope we can chat with you end of June. Hopefully after this decision has been reached. I'd like to hear your thoughts then. Thanks very much and have a great weekend.
Thank you.